Hello everyone. Welcome back to Tiny Tiger Collective. I'm Helena, and today I'll be sharing with you my impressions and experiences journaling in my very first Hobonichi Weeks. I first discovered Hobonichi as a brand of Japanese planners with the most beautiful Tomoe River Paper that works especially well with fountain pens back in 2023. So many people recommended Hobonichi to me when they found out that I was a fountain pen collector and lover. And I decided to try them out by purchasing a Hobonichi A6 Techo original that I used as a journal to keep track of my toddler's day-to-day life. Having discovered the beauty of these planners, in 2024, I had the opportunity to travel to Tokyo, where I purchased my first Hobonichi A5 cousin. My hopes for last year was to use this as my catch-all system. So I would keep track of all of my daily to-dos, tasks, events, meetings. But I would also use the daily pages as a space to journal about emotionally important events in my life, or take notes, keep track of what I was getting up to in my day-to-day. Although I thought it would be really convenient to have everything all kept in the one place, I unexpectedly found this one book system to be too chaotic for me to wrap my mind around. So I would have reminders to do laundry next to dentist appointments, next to really intimate, vulnerable journaling about all the happy memories I was having with my family, or with all the difficulties I was encountering in stressful periods of my work life. And because of this jumble of different emotional states, I found it really difficult to imagine archiving this book for the long term. And thinking that I might possibly recycle this planner at the end of the year, I lost the motivation to lovingly tend to this book, to pour my memories, to paste in ephemera and photographs. And I decided to start 2025, along with Hobonichi's launch of their new line, into swinging the pendulum far on the other end and trying a multi-book system to see if compartmentalizing the different aspects of my life would feel more easeful and more organized. So I began this year with multiple journals. So having loved keeping a toddler's book with daily memory keeping about my son and all the things that he gets up to as he grows every day more and more into a lively, energetic, confident child, is this Hobonichi A6, where I've been able to document the day-to-day happenings, his development, and all the happy memories that we've been making as a family. This book has been going really well. In 2025, I also decided to try my very first Hobonichi Weeks, which is their slim pocket size that I've seen so many people in the planner YouTube community showcase. So I really loved both of these covers and I couldn't decide, so I purchased two Hobonichi Weeks with the intention of keeping this one as my work planner and keeping this one as my health and wellness planner. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to split up my flip through of my Hobonichi Weeks in two videos. So today I will be walking through my work planner and talking about how I organize my work life and my career plans as an academic. And next week, I will do a more detailed flip through of my health and wellness planner and show you a little bit about how I track my symptoms and what I'm grappling with and how this book has helped me find healing and recovery. Back in 2023, when I first discovered Hobonichi as a brand, I found the week size really off-putting. I don't know what it is about, maybe it's the slimness or the fact that it's just, so narrow, but I always looked at the weeks as one size planner that I told myself I had no interest in collecting and absolutely no need for. So I have to admit, it was one of those cases where I became influenced after over a year of following planner YouTubers walk through how they use the weeks and also what they love about the weeks. That really got me to do a complete 180 on my feelings about this planner. That doesn't mean that everything is coming up roses with my experience using the Hobonichi Weeks so far in 2025. So I'll talk a little bit about what I like and also what I wish was different about the book. But first, let me give you a little flip through. So this is the 2025 Unsodo Bijutsukai cover. I really loved the blend of these colors. There's something about the muted tones, the pastel, the very abstract forms and shapes that really attracted me to this particular book. And I also quite like the fact that there's a symphony in the way that they've been composed, but there's also a lot of chaos, a lot of like moving parts. And that really encapsulate how I feel about my career and my job, which can sometimes feel like juggling multiple balls and trying to do diverse sets of responsibilities and blend them into the one coherent career. I have a plastic protective cover around the outside of my planner, and this is so that I could protect the cover and not worry so much when I am throwing this book into my work bag and carrying it with me day to day from home onto campus and not have to worry about leaky pens or leaky water bottles ruining the cover. I usually like to tuck my Midori ruler somewhere in my books to help me draw lines and divide up each of my weekly spreads. I have here a sticker of Alice from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland as, for me, a metaphor of what it can sometimes feel as a woman of color navigating academia. I use the calendars as a reference, but I haven't marked or made any notes onto these pages beyond here with my Tombow marker lightly highlighting the public holidays. I don't currently use the yearly spread. In my monthlies, I keep very, very basic records of important work events like faculty functions, but also things like when I'm taking leave, when teaching begins, when I'm traveling for conferences. And I also have all of the public holidays marked as well, along with a washi sticker over the number of the dates. Other than that, I don't really tend to make much use of my monthly pages. I do mark the current month with one of these Midori clips, and I have the bunny set. And these are very, very slim clips that allow me to use as a bit of a bookmark or a page flag. One of the great things about this year's Hobonichi Weeks is that they started all the way back on the 25th of November. I felt like that gave me over a month to play with these books before 2025 officially began. And it allowed me to experiment with different placements, different tracking, So I could get a feel very gradually about whether or not the Hobonichi Weeks worked for me, but also how to make micro adjustments week by week in order to improve its functionality. So, one of the ways in which I decided to organize my weekly spreads is that I will use these really helpful markers at the top and all along the day by day rows. And I would use this to draw one vertical line, and then beside it, there's no marker, but because the pages are quite thin, they allow me to see through to the other page where there's a grid. And I very roughly try to draw another line beside that first vertical line that is approximately 1 square in width. So that basically creates a double line where I'm able to write any events and meetings on this more narrow left-hand column. And then I have a wider right-hand column where I can track down all of my day-to-day work tasks. And the two lines that I've drawn provides a little strip where I am able to check off once I've completed each item. That leaves me with quite a large notes page on the right-hand side where I will write my work priorities, and I will also write my weekly wins. The pens that I've been using in my Hobonichi Weeks are both Sailor Pro Gear Slims. This one is Dragon Palace, and I have this one inked up with Diamine Celadon Cat. And this lovely shading ink for me is a very, very close match with the barrel of the pen itself. For the accent subheadings, I am using Meigetsu, and I've got this one inked up with J. Eban's Rue d'Encre. As an Australian, I find that inks are so much more affordable when I purchase them from British retailers, particularly with British-made inks such as Diamine. So ever since I got into the fountain pen hobby, I've tended to shop on UK sites. In the past, I've really liked purchasing from the writing desk, but their postage prices went up quite significantly last year, and I decided to try a different retailer from whom I purchased this Celadon Cat. And if you notice, there's a big ink stain over the front of this bottle because when I purchased it from this retailer, who shall remain unnamed, they put all of the items of my order, all of the ink bottles, into a cardboard box with no padding. So all these glass bottles were jangling against each other from the UK to Australia, and this was one of the bottles that had a really, really bad leak. It had stained the entire bottom of the box. So that was really disappointing. And that is going to be a retailer that sadly I won't be purchasing from again. But in most cases, when I purchase my inks from the UK, they arrive very quickly and in very good condition at a fraction of the cost of purchasing from a local retailer. I picked Rue d'Encre and Celadon Cat because to me, they complement the beautiful combination of colors on the cover of my Hobonichi Weeks. I'd say the green is a very lovely match for the leaf details, but unfortunately, I didn't make the best discernment when I chose Rue d'Encre for the accent ink because I somehow thought it might match these salmon, apricot, or pink colors, but it is actually much, much darker. So it doesn't quite work as well with this cover as I thought it did in my mind's eye. So week by week, what I did was I tracked all my meetings, my tasks. I might use the coral ink in order to highlight extra little events that was happening day to day. And overall, it was quite useful trying out this book during the quietest month of the year. There wasn't as much to track, so I wasn't too concerned if I hadn't quite developed a habit out of dipping into this book every day, and I might miss a few weeks here and there. And of course, this would have been 25th of December, Christmas Day. So the university shut down from Christmas Eve, and I didn't have any tasks to do, so I could leave this blank. Because I had a whole week off of work, I took advantage of the blank pages, and I've used this notes page on the last week of December and the first week of January to track an ongoing record of my research projects in 2025. So, what articles I have submitted and are under review at a scientific journal, which articles I'm planning to write next. And also, this gives me a view of what is coming down 3 or 6 months down the track and what projects I might be picking up, as well as understanding what projects maybe I've sent off, but will likely be coming back from peer review and requiring 3 months of intensive revision and resubmission. I also have here a running list of ideas for future research projects that I could start either with colleagues or solo. I really love having a list like this and having it somewhere in this planner for me to flip back to, because it gives me that big picture view of what exactly I'm doing year by year. It's easy to get caught in putting one foot in front of the other in my job, where you find yourself going through the day to day of teaching, answering emails, catching up with administration, filling out bureaucratic forms, that you forget to see whether or not you're on track with your long term vision and goals for your research. So, in this case, having this bird's eye view of what research projects I'm doing across a whole year allows me to make sure that I'm moving the needle forward in my day to day and my week to week activities. So, what's worked really well for me is having this running to do list week by week. It really helps me to start my day with just 15 minutes in this book, sitting down, enumerating all the most important things I need to achieve that day or that week. Coming back and referring to it, ticking it off, gives me a sense of satisfaction and progress. And it's allowed me to gather together all those little niggling tasks that are so easy to escape my attention, but I'm able to pull them together and lay them out to make sure that I am progressing through all of my milestones towards my goals. I've also really loved the fact that I've decided to keep a record of all of my weekly wins. So, after I list out my work priorities for the week, meaning the one or maximum two projects that I want to progress that week, I'll start a running list of all the things that I'm proud of. It could be anything from receiving a really heartfelt email from a student, receiving an acceptance for an article that I've worked very hard on for most of last year, and stopping to acknowledge the accomplishment of seeing that project through. It could be receiving a piece of good news about my job, about my role, having a lovely conversation with a colleague. And in one recent case, I even acknowledged a weekly win of saying no and withdrawing from a project that had been coming up with a lot of feelings of anguish and ambivalence. And I finally searched myself and confronted the fact that it wasn't aligned with my interests and with the direction in which I wanted to grow as an academic. So, after some deliberation, I wrote the organizers a compassionate, or also I hope a compassionate and respectful email, and thanked them for the opportunity, but withdrew from that project. And the relief that I felt when I sent that email, it was really palpable. And it was yet another reminder that it just wasn't aligned with my goals. And it was the right thing to do to say no in that particular case. Now that the year is in full swing, our faculty has also been running more research seminars, and more visiting scholars as well as existing faculty are presenting on their research. So that week, I attended a research seminar on ethics and calling, and it was so fascinating. And I made some notes while I was at the seminar in order to continue allowing the scholars' ideas to percolate throughout the rest of the week. Overall, I'm also really loving the opportunity to think things out on paper. Because you'll see week by week, I have so much note space on the right hand of each page. I've been trying to make better use of all of that paper by using that space to sometimes journal about my priorities, my goals, the pros and cons of doing certain projects or saying yes to certain opportunities. And it's actually provided a really nice space for me to almost think aloud on the page. It's enabled me to solve some dilemmas in my work by being able to have this little intimate space where I can reflect on my inner motivations and desires. What hasn't quite worked for me is I'm learning that I don't really need all the space in an entire planner, even though this is one of the smallest, most compact planners that Hobonichi produces, in order to track my work. It kind of goes both ways because I do find that sometimes these individual day by day rows aren't enough space for me. Particularly, you can see here where my tasks start expanding beyond the line and where I need to actually omit certain tasks and add in new ones. So prior to this week, I had thought that I would spend this whole week writing a particular book chapter, which at the start of the week, after that reflection, I decided to withdraw. So because I did that, I actually had to scratch out that task on all four of these days and then add in new tasks underneath. And while things can feel a little bit cramped on the left-hand side, they then feel a little bit too spacious on the right-hand side. So what I think I might experiment with moving forward is instead of repeating tasks that will be done from Monday through to Friday, I can try a tracking method where using the right-hand side, I'll write that particular task followed by Monday to Friday as the individual columns, and I will check off all the days of that week that I progressed that particular task. And that would also really help me save on some of the places where, say, for example, here, I've got a task to review a literature on a particular field, but that day, my son came down sick. So I had to rush him to see the doctor. And the time that I was going to spend on working on this research project, I ended up having to look after my very sick baby instead. So I drew an arrow to say I'd moved that down into Friday. So instead of doing that and taking up more precious real estate on the left-hand side, I think by using the system of listing all of my tasks of the week and simply checking off on the columns of what days of that week I worked on it will allow me to make those adjustments as they come up. So just because maybe I was planning to do it on Monday, but I ended up doing it on Wednesday, I simply need to check off Wednesday instead. The other thing that's very unique to my planning style and potentially unique to academic work is that I really need to plan further out in advance by loosely blocking out certain months or certain semesters to progress particular projects. For example, right before New Year's Eve, my colleague and I submitted a paper to a scientific journal, and it is now under review. It is likely that we will get our reviews back possibly around April or May. So knowing that it's possible that we might receive a revise and resubmit, so we'll get detailed feedback from peer reviewers who will tell us all the ways in which they think we need to strengthen, improve, or adapt the paper. That will be usually around 1 or 2 months of near full-time equivalent work. So I would like to have the opportunity to actually flip into March and very lightly pencil in the fact that that week and over the next month will likely be needing to respond to those reviews. That helps me then from not overextending myself. So if a colleague said, hey, do you think you could run a workshop in April? I would be able to ideally look through my planner and see that I've penciled in the fact that I will likely be working on this big paper revision. And I could say, oh, I don't think April would work well for me because I won't have time to develop the workshop. Could we move that workshop to May? But I don't really have the ability to do this right now in my planner without kind of making a little bit of a mess. So I suppose I could try penciling things in, but I know with me, penciling things in also makes it more difficult for me to go back and remember what to erase, what to replace, what to push out. So that kind of long-term broad strokes planning for me is the easiest to do on a digital calendar system. So I'll block out a whole day and I can very, very easily shift those tasks a month in advance, a month behind, move things around, and really see at a glance what kind of commitments I have likely to come up, but also making those changes in real time when needed without, say here, having to scratch out particular work tasks that I thought I would be doing and then turned out that I didn't need to do in that coming week. I also need to name the fact that in the 2025 lineup, the Tomoe River Paper has been very inconsistent in its performance. So some of you might know one of the real draw cards of the Hobonichi planner is the fact that they use Tomoe River Paper, which is this beautiful thin onion skin-like paper, and yet is an absolute workhorse when it comes to using fountain pens in this book. It holds fountain pen inks really, really well with, in theory, minor ghosting on the other side, but virtually no bleed through, and offering a type of coating on the paper itself that allows the most beautiful qualities of that ink to shine through, whether it be shading, as I have in my inks, sheen, or shimmer. So having become a Hobonichi convert in 2023, I love the way that it showed off my fountain pens and my fountain pen inks. I used the books happily from 2023 all through to last year across different Hobonichi planners. And it wasn't until 2025 in my Hobonichi Weeks alone where I found that the paper is not performing as well as it has across any of my other past planners, and even in my Hobonichi 2025 A6 Techo. So here the paper works exactly the way that it's always worked in my past planners. But when I began using my Hobonichi Weeks, I found that the ink that I'm using bleeds through much more easily on the other side, or at a minimum, ghosts so intensely that sometimes it became quite difficult to write and read page by page because of what was coming through on the other side. Another issue is that what would normally be quite a comfortable width with a nib. So here my Sailor Pro Gear Slims are both medium fine, so they're between a Japanese fine and a Japanese medium. While this exact pen and ink works really well in my A6, so here I find that this width is absolutely perfect for the size of the grid to keep my writing as legible and clear as possible. When using the same pen and the same ink in the Hobonichi Weeks, the ink had a way of spreading and blooming on the page that made the writing particularly thick. And yet it wasn't always consistent page by page. So if I may use an example, here is a page where I find that the writing is closer to the performance of previous papers. So yes, it's a little bit thicker, but I feel like I can actually read my writing more comfortably. Yet I'll flip 2 pages, and over here, my writing bloomed so badly that it does actually become quite difficult to read and to write. The inconsistency of the Hobonichi Weeks paper has made it quite difficult to stay in love with Hobonichi planners. One thing that has been helping me deal with the blooming and the spreading of my writing on each page is that I have started more religiously using the pencil board that I purchased with my Hobonichi order. I really love these pencil boards. They are designed to be tucked behind whatever page you are writing in order to provide a little bit more stability and structure. But one of the unadvertised outcomes of using a pencil board to write in a Hobonichi Weeks is that it does tend to make your writing thinner. It makes the ink spread less. So in order to combat the blooming, by tucking in the Hobonichi Weeks pencil board behind whatever page I'm writing, it's helped me write clearer and crisper on each page. There are also some note pages in the back of each Hobonichi Weeks after the weekly spread extends to the end of the year. I don't have anything fleshed out in these pages yet, but I've sketched out placeholders for myself here as a future contents page. I haven't finalized my performance plan yet for the year. I know it's March, but it's not unusual for academics at my institution to design their performance plans in mid or even late March. So once I've met with my performance manager and confirmed what my targets and KPIs will be for the year, I will sketch them out and make sure to refer to them, particularly if I'm invited along to a new research project or I have an opportunity for a conference or some sort of travel or some sort of event that I can flip over to my performance plan and look at the different goals that I've set out and ask myself if it aligns. It's very easy in my role to say yes to every opportunity that comes along and quickly realize that I'm burnt out and overworked, and half of the things that I was doing were not even aligned with my overarching goals for the year. So I plan to sketch out my performance targets and make sure that I'm referring to this regularly through the year to ensure that I'm making the best use of my time. I'm also going to keep a running list of my research projects and my submissions on this page as well. Here is where my notes page become more free reign, and there's actually quite a few pages, even though I opted for the regular Hobonichi Weeks. This is not a Hobonichi Weeks Mega, which comes with many, many more pages, and it's a lot thicker. So here I've sketched out an article that I plan to write, and I've designed what the structure of the article will be as I'm reading the literature and scoping out what sections I think that manuscript needs to include. I love having scratch paper like this. I used to actually write a lot of my article plans on either the back of a napkin or the back of a receipt. And then, of course, either have all of these receipts and scrap pieces of notes covering my table all around my laptop and look extremely chaotic and messy, or I would lose them. So having this work planner has helped me start the practice of keeping all of my plans and my inspirations in the one place. I also haven't needed to use some of the spreads out the back as much. But one of the things that I've started doing is using this two spread favorites page, which is really designed for people using this as a general personal planner to say maybe note down their favorite movies, their favorite books, their favorite music, restaurants, so on and so forth. But I'm actually tracking all of the articles that I've had accepted. So I'll write the date where it was accepted and I'll write the title of the article. And in the ideal world, I'll also write down who I wrote them with, my co-authors' names, and what scientific journal or edited book volume I submitted them to. But for the interests of privacy for my co-authors, I've decided just to leave it at that, because at least reading the title itself, I know what project that refers to. And that's how I've been using my work planner. So very simple, very basic, but I'm hoping that these few months of doing my micro adjustments and refining the process of how I'm using this book to track my work activities and responsibilities, as well as establishing the regular habit of using this book every day or every couple of days to make sure that I'm on track with my work tasks. I'm finding that this will set me up in good stead for later in the year when I step into a classroom from May and I will need to be juggling teaching alongside my research responsibilities. So I will have days where I'm delivering seminars, lectures, issuing assessments, marking assessments, and returning feedback to my students, while also juggling student consultations that might come up ad hoc. Meanwhile, trying to keep on track with all of my publishing responsibilities or the research projects that I will need to progress, the co-authors who are waiting on me to complete certain sections, as well as all the requirements of my service and leadership at my university, where I will need to run developmental workshop for my colleagues or coordinate committee meetings. So later in the year, my work will really start to get more intense. And the past couple of months of establishing this ritual will set me up in good stead to navigate the challenges ahead. So this is how I have been using my Hobonichi Weeks in the Unsodo Bijutsukai cover to helping me feel more organized and more peaceful when I'm at work. Do any of you use a planner for your work? And if so, what planner system have you developed to help you keep on track with your work tasks? I would love to hear your experiences, as well as any tips and advice you might have for navigating some of the challenges that I described or the challenges that you have faced in the past. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and being part of this rich and generous community of planners and stationery lovers. Next week, I will come to you with a detailed walkthrough of my other Hobonichi Weeks here in the Yumi Kitagishi beautiful wallpaper cover that I've been using to track my health, my illnesses, as well as all the things that I'm doing to foster healing and joy in my life. I hope to see you back next week. Take care for now and see you then. Bye-bye.